Hi, I'm Bob Claflin.
And I'm Ron DePadua.
Ron, what do we have today?
Well, we're at the historic Hancock Shaker Village in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And behind me is the Round Barn, which is a well-known, famous barn designed by the Shakers. And today we're going to visit with Mr. Bill Sensony in his blacksmith shop situated nearby. And he'll be going over blacksmithing and wheelwrighting for us today.
What I thought I'd do today is show you how the tire rim was started out using some basic tools. The lever that I'm pulling on is activates the bellows in the back, and what we have here is a double action bellows. The brick structure is called a forge. It housed the fire, which is made up of soft coal and can reach very high temperatures quickly. Temperature ranges from 2,000 upwards to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And what we have here is basically around 2,000 to 2,200 degrees. But most of that wasn't necessarily known by the smith. He just had to spot the colors, and by colors and basic measuring tools we're able to make all the different implements that he was called upon to do. So what I'm doing with the bellows is blowing a blast of air into the bottom of the fire, keeping the temperature of the fire hot, and in that way heating up the metal. So I'm going to go over here to the anvil, which is basically the blacksmith's workbench, and just start a little curve on the end of this bar, just by tapping it over the horn of the anvil with a slight heat in it. The blacksmith is able to make his adjustments or forge his product. Once that little curve is started, then by coming over here to what we call the tire bender, this tool was created by a company in Canton, Massachusetts, also around the turn of the century, and was a common tool to both the wheelwright and blacksmith shop. And you can see by just adjusting this mechanism here, you can change the radius of the tire, or the rim of the tire, and then by pushing it through the bender, an arc would be created. Now this could be done cold in smaller diameter stock, and heavier stock, which you would commonly see in a bigger tire, would have to be heated first and then done in increments to bend that curve. And once that circle was completed and brought around, it was then be welded together in a process called a forge weld. And what I've done here is prepare just a little circle, prepared it to go together, and by heating that, I'm going to heat this up to a forge welding temperature, which is in the vicinity of 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit. But that again is just a matter of spotting the right temperature. The blacksmith worked by eye most of the time. He didn't have temperature gauges and thermometers like a modern metallurgist or metalsmith might have. What he had was just relied on his skill as a craftsman, his knowledge that was usually passed down and was also acquired by years of experience. So what I have is putting this right in the fire, right over the air blast. I'm going to bring it up to the welding temperature. I'm going to prepare it a little bit. This white powder that I'm going to use is used as a flux compound. It's 20-multene borax, and it's a common compound used by blacksmiths. I'm going to have to go right over here to the anvil first. And the fire scale, which is oxidation caused from the heating of the material in the fire, is quickly brushed off and removed. And then the flux is applied to protect that area in the fire and cut down on the scaling. And then the two pieces that are going to be fused together get heated up to that welding temperature. And the temperature is critical. It's something that happens naturally. It's a molecular bonding that's caused from the heating, and then that weld is refined. You ready? In that way, a ring could be fused together. This would be how the bands on a wagon wheel hub would be made, or the rim of the tire. And you can see there how those two are welded together. Now, sometimes it takes a number of heats in and out of the fire for that to happen correctly, or to be completely cleaned up and free of any seams, but that's the basic technique of that. What they did, Ron, was bring in this really well-maintained big wagon wheel to show a few aspects about it. The wheelwright was probably his most called-on job to do was both making wheels and correcting wheels, which is why he was called a wheelwright.
I understand that the wheels sometimes shrink and become loose.
That's just the nature of the material that is being used. Wood expands and contracts with temperature, humidity, and so sometimes wagons' wheels would change depending on what type of wood was used in making the wheel, or what the temperature was, or what kind of use it was. So they would wear and change, get sloppy, get worn out, and would have to go back to a wheelwright, a carriage builder, to have the spokes and hubs and things tightened up or readjusted. And so the way the wheel was constructed was very important. How it took the stress of the weight of the wagon was important. And so a wheelwright who constructed a good wheel was always assured of a lot of business.
I see.
And so one of the things that I thought would be of interest would be just to see this wheel itself, and then just describe some of the basic parts. The hub, which is one piece of wood that is banded in steel, and with mortise and tenoning, the spokes fit into the hub and then fit into this outer rim, which was built in sections. These are called felloes, these sections on the outside.
Okay.
And then that was banded with a big ring of iron. Now, this banding, through research, I found that this is an American invention, that banding the wheel in a solid piece of steel was first done in America and then picked up in Europe and throughout the world. Prior to that, the metal was just sections of curves that were nailed to the outside ring.
I see.
So we developed or improved on the wagon wheel. And this rim is important in that it had to fit this outside ring exactly to within 1/8 of an inch, because it's the banding, the shrinking of the wheel going from hot to cold on the outside of this ring that held the entire piece together. And just with, you can see some screws here, just kept the wagon wheel from shifting on this outside rim. And then there's a couple of interesting tools that we have here. One of the most important tool in the wheelwright shop was this little circular hinged type tool that's called a traveler. And this was the measuring device. Blacksmith didn't need to know a whole lot of math at first. It just wasn't a part of his curriculum sometimes, but he did have to know some basic tool work and things. This tool was for measuring a circle or for distance. And you can see here there's a little mark right on this. And by starting that mark and traveling along and counting the number of times that mark came around, we were able to figure out the distance I needed for both the rim to fit the outside diameter of the wagon wheel. And in the construction of this wagon wheel, this tool here called a spoke auger was used to create the tenon joint that's on the end of this spoke.
I
It's
see,
like
yeah.
a big pencil sharpener. This was used to create that tenon to fit it inside the felloes.
So they would miter perfectly in.
Everything, the tighter the fit, the better the wheel.
Now tell me, what was the basic finish that they put on these wheels?
Most of the carriages and wheels, wagon parts, wooden parts, they will all be painted. And through the research that I've come across, they all were very heavily painted with a lead paint, which we don't use today.
Of course we don't, right?
But that's what was commonly used for the wagons. It protected the wood, cut down on the shrinking, and gave, with paint and maintenance, gave the wagon a long lifespan.
Well, thank you very much. It's been very interesting, and we have a much better knowledge of wheelwrighting.
What do we have here?
This is called a tap and die machine. It was first produced by the Wells Brothers Company in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Is a forerunner of the 5 companies that combined later on to become Greenfield Tap and Die. And as a wheelwright or blacksmith shop, being the local hardware store, nuts, bolts, and screws needed to be made. And this is a machine that was produced for the blacksmith and the wheelwright and other machinists for doing that. So by changing this chuck and changing the different sizes for threading a bar, blacksmith or wheelwright could feed his bolt into the machine little by little, get it right in there, and then turn this crank like that, and cut a thread on a bolt similar to this, and then make a matching nut to go onto that bolt. So the blacksmith, had many things required of him, and just with some basic tools, he was able to create many of those pieces of hardware that were needed. This was something that made that production happen a little faster.
In the labor force of those days, was the blacksmith, where was he in the level of payment? Was he well paid or not well paid?
He was usually well paid. He was usually the central craftsman to all communities. In colonial days, he was the first craftsperson whose ship fare from Europe would be paid for by a community. He was brought over before doctors or lawyers or other craftsmen. He was needed to create and help create any community. So he was key, central to most communities, and was very well thought of.
In 1888, Charles J. Wise built a unique 2-story blacksmith wheelwright shop in Worcester, Massachusetts. Sold to Victor E. Droulet in 1907, it had 3 large forges with hand-operated bellows in which they could hand-forge all the things that they needed for the restoration of wagons. There were stalls for horses where shoeing and other horse work was conducted, as well as many tools and hand-operated machines for the restoration and servicing of the wagons. The large wagons were entirely completed on the first floor with the smaller ones being able to be brought up to the second floor by a very unique design ramp on the side of the building. Now, it had at the very top a hand-operated winch in which a rope was lowered down with a large hook, and attached to the undercarriage of the wagon, it could be slowly hauled up to the second floor while a second man steered it by the steerage poles in the front. Now, he would carefully walk up the small steps in the middle, and as it reached the top, it was brought in for painting and pinstriping, as well as all the finished upholstery work and leather work that had to be put onto the wagon. And also the accessories were attached onto it at this time. As the horse and buggy days were coming to a close, Victor's son, Edward Goulet, took over the business, and it eventually evolved into an early automobile service station, being torn down in 1972. Today we're at the home of Mr. John Mikula, the Woodwright Shop in Hampton, Massachusetts. John is a period cabinet maker and horse-drawn buggy restorer and maker.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, Ron. I think what we'll do right now at this point is this vehicle is a Stanhope, and it was one of the most popular vehicles of the little higher priced category. And we have it painted, top coated, it's been striped, and now we're at the final assembly, which would be the upholstery work. And you notice that this is the original upholstery, which is probably about 100 years old or so. The nice diamond button pattern that they have. And what we would do is we would duplicate whatever we can do feasibly to reproduce this. This is actual leather, and the leather would be extremely expensive. So what we would do is use a naugahyde, which would be imitation leather. But other than that, it would be very expensive to redo this. And you'll notice it has a backing, and it has horsehair, which was the primary filler, and a cotton, unprocessed cotton, that the horsehair, it would just make the fabric smoother and set the buttons in deeper. So this is the final step on this vehicle.
I see. So this that would make for a much more comfortable seat, adding the cotton upholstery backing underneath.
Correct. The cotton also makes the buttons set in. The horsehair isn't very, it doesn't compress very well, but the cotton, a 1-inch layer of cotton, allows the buttons to set in deeper, and then your clothing won't get caught on the buttons. Plus, it gives it dimension, depth.
Tell us a little bit about the actual frame here and how you got that to the restored estate.
Well, usually the vehicle is completely disassembled, completely stripped. Usually, I burn the paint off. I don't use any of paint removers, and then I start with fine rough sanding and then multi-coats of primers and fillers. And this one needed a new panel on the back, which was mostly mostly all the panels that the Americans used were popular. And I replaced the panel on the back of this from water damage, but the side panels were good. And there's approximately about 70 hours of work just in this body here to get it to look the way it's looking now.
Now I notice there's some pinstriping on the side here too. Do you do the pinstriping, or is that something that you have someone else do? Or
No, I have a professional sign painter, and his grandfather was a carriage and a sleigh striper. And I call him up and I ask him, are you interested? And he says, I'll try it. And he does a great job, and he does a nice line, and which is one of the most important parts of the finish work. If you have a super coat on it and with good depth, and you get a lousy pinstripe job, then it reflects the whole job. So the pinstriping is one of the most important parts of the total finish work.
okay. So why don't you show us, John, a little bit about the wagon wheel construction and how you restore them?
Okay, Ron. This is a cannon wheel from a 50-millimeter howitzer that was made in France, and it was sold to the Confederates. I'm in the process of the wheel has been reconstructed, and we have the first coat of top coat on it, and you notice that the fallows are in 6 sections, and the spokes are fairly straight. It's a very common wheel, and this wheel was possibly built around 1850. And behind us we have the American wheel, which belongs on a Concord buggy. It's just received a colored coat, and it has to be scuffed, and then 2 coats of top coating. But you notice that the spokes are a lot thinner to lighten up the wheel. The fallows are in half. So there's 2 sections of fallows, which is, another way, is the rim. And the Americans really did of course they had all the native hardwoods, and ash and hickory was the primary wood. And there was quite a few ways of steaming, but the larger manufacturing, the wheel manufacturers, they really process an ideal steaming way of making the wheels and getting a true wheel. And this wheel here is probably manufactured in the 1890s. It's still the common wheel. It has no bearings in it, just sleeved, and it was fairly durable.
Great. Well, thank you very much. These are quite beautiful wheels. I can imagine what they're going to look like on the wagon. This is what the wagon frames look like after many hours of preparation. They now await the body. And now John's going to show us a little bit of what it's like to, what he starts off with pretty much, which is parts in their original state, rusted state. And tell us how you get that to more of a painted state, John.
Okay, the malleable iron, usually what we usually do is always have it sandblasted. Then there's a certain amount of grinding to remove the pits. And then from there we have multi-coats of primer and preservative to bring back the original sheen to the metal. Johnny has an original buggy to show us here, and he's going to talk a little bit about it. Tell us a bit about this, John. Yes, this is a original road wagon, which was manufactured in Boston by Sargent. He was a leading wagon manufacturer in Massachusetts. It's a primary museum piece, and the principal purpose of the vehicle was for road racing. That was, you notice the high wheels, very large wheels. The suspension is very stiff. It's really not made for comfort, it's made for speed.
So this would be a racer of its time.
The race of its time.
And what year would you say this was made in about?
It has a very low serial number on a rear tag, and I would say it's probably in the 1860s to 1870s.
We're standing in front of another unique coach that John has restored. This is what one looks like when it's completely done. And John, tell us about what year and what kind of coach this is.
Okay, this is a Brougham, an English Brougham. It's classified as a bachelor's style. It was built in 1860, and its primary purpose was for businessman's transportation in England, and this vehicle here was designed for more comfort and class for the higher class people of England.
I can see it has many unique features, nice lamps, bold front glass in the front, and it has a finely put together interior. Well, it's quite a beautiful beautiful wagon, and this is a prime example of what it looks like when it's completed.
Almost stepped on my foot. Good boy. Okay. Okay, come on. Okay, now we'll hook up the buggy. Okay. Good boy. That's a good boy.
And now we're going to take a ride in one of the restored buggies. John has his fine horse hitched up, and let's see what it's like to ride in an old buggy.